Welcome to the Human Athlete Podcast, empowering your life transition beyond sport, while celebrating the whole person behind the athlete. With your hosts, Kelsey Stockard, Steve Moore, and Jamie Comer, powered by Athlete Career Transition.
You're about to listen to part 2 of Steve Moore from the Human Athlete Podcast in conversation with Samarie Walker.
Now, you mentioned earlier when you were growing up in Ohio that because of the colour of your skin, it was a challenge. Mm-hmm. You were one of the only black families in the area, one of the only black faces in school. Mm-hmm. People didn't look like you. You faced discrimination because of that. Tell us a little bit about the feelings that gave you. And the reason I ask this is that obviously it's Black History Month in the US at the moment. And one of the things that I think Black History Month is about, or two things that I think that it's about, there's lots to it, but two things that I think it's about is one is highlighting the challenges around race discrimination, particularly in the black community, and two, giving hope and showing the shining light of those that have gone before us, the black stars of the past, that we can look to and go, do you know what? These are stellar people, and we can live our lives like this. And if we take what we've got from the past and take it forward into the future, then we do have a brighter future around this subject. And they're the two of the things that I take from Black History Month. But tell us a little bit about your story around race and the challenges that you face, because I think it's important to understand that firstly. And this is not something we can cover in 10, 20 minutes, but just a flavour of it. And this is something that's really close to my heart. My wife is mixed race, and over the last 2 or 3 years, I've developed a completely different understanding around, firstly, what it is to be white. Mm-hmm. Because I was brought up in a very different environment to my wife. I've learned about white privilege. I've learned about microaggressions. I've learned about the Black history of Britain, because I didn't know that the Black history of Britain goes back 600-700 years. Because when I was taught history in school, it was about all of the white heroes and villains in history. So I've gone on a journey myself over the last 2 or 3 years, exploring this and trying to understand it better and trying to have a better grasp of what the world is like for someone like yourself who's grown up in a community where most of the faces are white. So tell us a little bit about your story. Give us a flavour of it, so that the listeners can understand where you're coming from.
Definitely. I think it goes back just a little bit before me with my dad and his father. So they were born and raised in Mississippi, and his dad was, you might as well say a slave. He was a sharecropper, and he was working out in the fields and getting paid 10 cents a day or something, 10 cents a week, something ridiculous. I want to say a day, though. That would make a lot more sense. And he just had to take pretty much whatever jobs that he could, complete lack of education. Then my dad, with him, it was like that's when they first integrated schools. So he said that when the white kids came to their schools, they would beat them up all the time because it was, one, it was payback, and two, they were different. So it was like, you bully the new kids. And he said that he regrets doing that, though, because that was an opportunity for him to kind of like bridge that gap. Exactly. Yeah. And it was, kind of the opposite, but still, like, they might have needed that for them to, not be racist. Maybe that caused them to not like black people at the end of the day. So what he taught me was, and my mom, same thing. Granted, my mom grew up in the North, so very, very different experiences, and they're almost 10 years apart, so very different experiences. They always taught me to be strong, to not fear people because of what we look like. That on the inside, we're all the same. As long as I work hard, I'm smart, I'm this, I'm that. But I was also taught that I always had to work, extra hard. I always had to get, way better grades than everybody else because of the color of my skin. And I didn't understand it back then. I don't remember this, but both my parents, actually, it was really weird, recently told me this story. about when we first moved here and was staying with my grandma, and they took me to a park and there were other kids over there. So them not thinking anything of it, let me run over there. They're walking behind me to go and meet the parents, and they grabbed their kids and left as soon as we got over there. And that was one of our first experiences here. And so they were like very, very off-put and scared for me, scared for themselves, wondering if they should go back to Illinois. But they stayed. And then when we got our own place, I remember being at the park, and there were these two older white girls. They were probably in their teens, and I was like 6 or 7 at the time. And I was, thinking I'm cool hanging out with some older kids, but they were above me on the playground, and I was underneath on this little tire swing. And they spit in my hair, but I didn't know this. My dad, he looked in my hair when I got back. He said, "Samarie, what's in your hair?" And I'm like, "I don't know nothing like my hair." And he was like, "No, somebody spit in your hair." And I said, "No, they didn't." And he said, "Who was at the park who spit in your hair?" And I said, "Nobody. Like, I don't know." And then eventually I started to lie because I did know who was there, but I didn't want him to be mad at me or do or say anything to them. I didn't understand, the seriousness of what was going on. And now when I look back, there's a few times where I've actually cried because I said I can't imagine him being a black man from Mississippi, deep South, and going through what he went through, moved to Ohio, a northern that was a free state, and he's still having to he's watching his daughter experience this. So now he has no type of hope or faith for him as a black man or for his black daughter. So that was I, again, never thought about it like that until now, because now I'm, ready to have kids. So I'm looking at things so much differently. And then when I got good at basketball, it was always every time they compared me to somebody. And again, where we lived at, there weren't very many African Americans, but it was always me versus a white player all the time. It could be a white boy or a white girl, to the point where they created blogs on the they created a thread on the blog just for my family, where they were saying, "Take your black asses back to Chicago. You guys don't belong here. Your daughter has an attitude problem. You guys are monkeys. You are this. You are that." Talking about my parents and them having attitudes, like all sorts of things. And this was because of 5th or 6th grade girls basketball in the early 2000s. It's not like now where there's money involved with high school athletes. We weren't even thinking about NIL deals back then, or even the WNBA. We didn't know if that was going to last. So what was everyone's issue? And again, I never looked at it like that until I became an adult, and I'm starting to experience the same kinds of things now as a black woman. So in high school, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't bad at all. I don't think I don't feel like I experienced anything as far as my race in high school, mostly sexuality, but it still wasn't bad. It was just boys being gross, or like people being confused and wanting to ask questions. And then in college, I don't think we experienced it, and as well as overseas, because we were athletes. So people look at you differently when you are a black athlete or some sort of black talent. You aren't, for whatever reason, as threatening. And I think it's because people, one, respect people who have talents, but it's like if you can make it to the D1 level, or you can make it to play a professional sport, then you must be good, or you must be intelligent. If people just look at us as if we're not already that, or we just can't be that. So to answer your question of how that's made me feel, very inferior, like I don't belong. There probably would have been a point in time where talking to you would have caused me a lot of anxiety because you are a white man. And even though like you're one of the most awesome people I've ever met, I still would have like questioned, like he's a white man, so he probably really don't like me, or he's probably racist. There was a point in time where I thought everybody was racist, where I would like scream at people, especially during the this election where Trump was running against Biden, and people would have their Trump shirts on, and I would tell, I don't effing like white people. I don't like you. I would tell them before they had the opportunity to tell me. And that caused me so much anger. And on the flip side of that, how can I not like white people when I have white friends? So it was like, it's not that I don't like white people. I don't like white people who are ignorant and are racist and have the audacity to say or even believe certain things about a group of people simply because of the color of their skin. Like it's not like we did anything to make people believe this. And also to your point of that, like, Black British history goes back that far, they only teach us about slavery, and it's definitely for a reason. I've yet to really uncover that reason, but I'm getting there. But that we were not just black people, but to keep it on that, we were kings and queens before slavery. We were taken from our land, and there are still kings and queens there. Africa is a very beautiful country, but we don't get taught that. There were lots of LGBTQ plus kings and queens back in the day that they didn't talk about over in Europe and everywhere. So, we again, I may not ever understand why, certain groups of people are oppressed, but typically when a group of people are oppressed, it's because of their power, and someone wants them to not realize their power. So that goes for women, that goes for people of color, and that goes for the LGBTQ plus community. So we got to figure it out. But I know women, we give birth. I don't know. I will say with my whole heart and full confidence that I believe God is a woman, because one, men cannot create such beauty. I'm sorry, Steve, but look at the earth. And just sometimes something that God says in the Bible is like,
face.
Hold on.
Come on.
I know. Hey, so look, a woman had to do that. I'm just saying, a woman had to create a woman. I think, gay or not, women are just very beautiful creatures. And the fact that we can give birth, that so much was put on us, even from our cycles, everything. So it's like everything is birthed from a woman. Why are people afraid of our power? Why are people afraid of black people and their power? What powers that do I have from being gay that I don't know about yet? That's what I'm trying to figure out. So,
well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you mentioned ignorance, and I think it's the ignorance around those subjects is really stark, I think, and with ignorance comes fear, and with knowledge comes power, and with that power you can do good.
Exactly.
And I'm only, I'm really early on in my journey of exploration around race and the history of race and why it is the way it is, and not because of any other reason that I need to know, because I have a wife who's mixed race. If we have children, I've got to bring up a mixed race little boy or little girl. And if I don't know enough about that subject, what sort of a father would I be? Exactly. And that, for me, that's really, really important, that I have the knowledge to firstly educate my lineage coming through.
Yes.
And then secondly, I can help educate the people around me, because I was brought up in a white dominated environment. The first black face that I ever saw was when I was 17, and I played in a rugby team with a guy who was black from the other end of the country from me. I'm still good friends with him today, and we catch up occasionally and talk about all the old rugby days. But I, at that age, when he was in my team, I didn't see him as any different. I didn't see him as a black face. I saw him as a great rugby player and someone who was in my team, helping my team to be the best it could be. And that's the attitude, thankfully, that I've taken into my adult life. But I know that it could have gone a completely different way because of the environment that I was brought up in and lived in. And I now recognize what white privilege is all about.
For sure.
And it's not that you're doing something wrong when you talk about white privilege. It's the circumstances you're born into. And
exactly.
And how you behave around that depends on the type of person you are, I think. And how you take that into your life going forward depends on the person that you are, and how you educate yourself, how you learn about different cultures, different backgrounds, different people, because everyone is completely different. And I think it's super important that ignorance is gotten rid of, and the more education that goes around this subject, the LGBTQ plus subject, the better, because it's without that education, without that knowledge, we can't move forward. And that goes for both sides. It's not just about one side or the other. It goes for both sides. We've both got to have enough knowledge to have a proper conversation about it, so we can come to an agreement that means sense going forward, or makes sense going forward, and we can live together amazingly, which is what most people can do, I think.
Yes, 1,000%. I commend you for being so open, for being so intellectual, intelligent, and aware of, you're with a person who is different from you. You might have kids with this person, and we have to realize it's still so new. All of this is still so new. Slavery ended a couple hundred years ago. We just segregated schools. My dad is only 61, and he lived through segregation. So, there are people who are alive who can remember their parents who were slaves. So it's like all this stuff is still pretty new. And with the LGBTQ plus, everything is new. Yeah. So, it might not happen in our lifetime, Steve, but I think there will come a time where it might not ever go away, but it will be a lot better, and we'll all be in more harmony.
I don't think it'll be in our lifetime, unfortunately, but I think there's definitely hope, and there's definitely a way forward. And I think it takes people like us who can have conversations like this, from a white face talking to a black face,
yes,
and talking very openly about where you've come from, what your experience is, and how you can come together. I think that's the biggest thing that needs to happen, because that doesn't happen enough, I don't think.
I agree. I can't agree with you more. I say the same thing about with my conversations with Jamie, that I have to be vulnerable and open about this, and not fearing it making her uncomfortable, because she's not like that. It makes me more uncomfortable than it makes her. And like you said, that a lot of things come from our mind and these fears that we have. And when I take the time to open up and express myself to the right people, I get a great response, and we can have these, like you said, have this type of dialogue.
Absolutely. I think that the mind is a super powerful thing, I think, right? It's got some amazing abilities, most of which we never ever tap into, but it's also your worst enemy, your mind, because it builds things up to a state which is not real.
Yes.
And this is everything in your life, not just subjects like this. This could be, you've had a letter from the taxman come through the door, and you automatically you're going, oh my God, what does the taxman want with me?
Yep.
And you're in fear straight away, because your mind's running 100 miles an hour about what have I done, what have I not put in, all that sort of stuff. And so your mind is super powerful, but it can be your worst enemy. And I think if you can control your mind in a way that helps you to learn, understand, and empathize, then that you're on the road to a place that's very, very different than if you're closed and you just stay with what you know, which is very little for most people, and what you've been brought up as, which is very closeted for lots of people as well.
Yes.
But listen, there is hope, and one of the things about Black History Month is that it's talking about people who inspire us, and black individuals who've done some amazing things. And you talked earlier on about an inspiration in your life that helped you to get into sport. And I think one of the overriding themes talking to you, Samarie, is that sport has been your saviour in some respects.
Yes.
And if it wasn't for that individual that you saw that inspired you to become an amazing basketball player, then who knows what would have happened. So just talk to me a little bit about the amazing times you've had in sport, the initial pathway, and what do you think it's given you in your life, putting to one side for a moment all of the challenges that you've had, but just purely talking about the sport and what it's given you.
Freedom. I wouldn't have went to college. My parents, I don't know how they afforded to pay for me to go to a private high school, so they definitely wouldn't have been able to afford me to go to college. So that, to meet all types of people, again, we would not be having this conversation here in the UK. I'm in little bitty Ohio, and it's given me opportunity to meet people like you, to meet people in Spain, to learn how to speak, the different variations of Spanish, to learn a couple Swedish and Lithuanian words, the ones I could pick up, to try different foods, to get on a plane in the first place. To get a passport, to do things that most people, like I thought everybody had a passport, but most people don't. So things, learning things, traveling to places, meeting people that I would have never had the opportunity to if I did not play basketball at all. I think the most important thing is a sense of self, even though a lot of times we lose that after sport. Um, I still know at the end of the day, with or without basketball, now being retired, that I'm confident, that I'm a strong person, I'm very strong-willed, that I can step up to and get through challenges, that I can easily find solutions to big problems, and I can connect with anybody. I can hold a conversation with anybody. I can work with anybody. I work great in a team. So all types of different skills that transfer over to, the real world, and that is our real world, but when we get in the work world, I should say.
So what do you think would have happened if you hadn't have rocked up at that court? And remind me again who the athlete was that you were inspired by.
Her name is Tamika Williams.
Tamika Williams. So if you hadn't have seen Tamika Williams on that day, how do you think your life would have panned out?
Steve, I would probably be trapping like my parents were, like gotten into something illegal. Because, honest to God, when we were living in Chicago and we weren't working, when COVID had just hit, we were walking past gang members and drug dealers all day. And I was like, man, what would it hurt if I just sold a couple bags to get us enough money to eat? But I could never do it. I could never bring myself to do it. One, I have too much respect for myself and my freedom. And I always told myself, not because I don't look down on my parents whatsoever. Everyone does their own thing. They make their own choices.
Does what they need to do, yeah.
Exactly. But I always told myself I would never do it because what they did, how it affected our family, having to go on the run, having to be, concerned about my dad in jail, and just, always wondering, was that something that was going to follow him the rest of his life? And I didn't want that to ever happen to me. Or, now being married to my wife and bringing her into that definitely don't want to keep repeating cycles. So, but yeah, or I probably just be a regular lame person, man. I don't know. I wouldn't be me. I'd be some old average Joe Schmo working at McDonald's or something.
I do not believe that for one moment. I think that...
Really?
100%. I think that gave you the inspiration to do what you did sporting wise, but I still think that knowing you better now after the hour and a half that we'd have spent together, that you would have still been an amazing woman and a strong role model going forward. I don't think you'd have been average in any way, shape or form, Samarie, at all, to be honest.
Well, thank you.
That brings us nicely on to the last little piece that I want to talk about, which is the curveball that all athletes get thrown. When you think you've sort of sorted stuff out, you think you're on top of everything, you think you're amazing, and nothing's ever going to knock you off your perch, you then have to finish playing sport. And the sporting gods throw you that horrible curveball of retirement and trying to find out what's next. So I know that for the last couple of years, you've tried lots of different things. You've been through your own particular journey. Just talk us through what that felt like initially to retire from sport, and the journey that you've gone on over the last 2 or 3 years to explore who you are and how you can find your way in the world post retirement from basketball.
For sure. I think it kind of started while I was still in college, because I was always coming up with different ideas that I wanted to pursue, but I would always get laughed at, so I never, did it. And then once I got overseas and I kind of had my own money, I was isolated, I started my clothing line. So that was like my first, try at entrepreneurship and really just, working other than basketball. Came back home, I got into sales, I worked with Sprint, did retail at JCPenney's, was a manager at Verizon, worked at Sprint again, worked at Verizon again, all types of cell phone jobs. I worked at Walmart when they were like implementing a new thing with like not having cashiers in the store, so that was really cool to be a part of that. I've coached, I've trained, and at the end of the day, when I look back, I wish that I had more pride in who I was as a person versus what I did, because I was always embarrassed about the jobs that I had because they weren't as as beautiful as playing professional basketball. They weren't as cool. I didn't get to travel as much.
Mhm.
But now fast forward to going through a lot and not having a job at all, working at TriNet. It's I compare it to basketball in the way it's very competitive, and there's so much room for growth. Whether that's with my skill set, obviously with my skills to move up and get promotions, and then money. I get paid. I get paid honestly more than I did when I was overseas, so I cannot complain whatsoever. And I still had somewhat of a identity crisis and imposter syndrome because I was like, I'm up here selling HR and I'm making phone calls, just sitting at my desk making calls all day and getting voicemails and sending emails. Like, what the heck am I doing? And I was like, making money. I'm working. I'm providing for my household. I'm working to get better. I'm working to figure out who I am. What's wrong with selling HR and calling people all day and getting paid more than I got paid to play basketball, putting my life and my body on the line every night? I'm very safe sitting at my desk typing and making phone calls, so I don't have to get out of breath doing this. So I don't have to get up. I can sit down all day. I don't have to run sprints or do none of that mess. So so it's like, what am I complaining about? What is the issue? But there is that identity thing and that confidence in what you're doing, and also that fear of not knowing what's next. When we play sports, we kind of always know we're going to go into a new season, even if it's with a new team. We know that there's that opportunity. Whereas with this, it's like you feel stuck sometimes. Like, I have to work this job forever. But I think that's just our mentalities, maybe upbringing, seeing our parents do that. But more and more people now are they're optimizing their opportunities, and they don't stay at jobs for 20 years, barely a year anymore. So I think that once we, not just as athletes, but everybody accept that, like, nothing lasts forever and things are sometimes learning experiences. If you have faith, for me, I feel like God has positioned me, in a place where I can't mess up now. And if I mess up, it is solely on myself.
Solely on your shoulder.
You know what I'm saying? So, has really, really blessed me. And no, it doesn't look like what I thought my life would look like at 29 at all. But I couldn't ask for better in terms of the people I have in my life now. Again, having income and being able to work from the comfort of my home. I can sit next to my wife some days and do my job, and I'm still pulling an income like that. You can't beat that, man. So it's like, to each his own. And I know we all have our journeys. I'm so, empathetic towards that because I went through it horribly. Yet there's a point in time we just got to accept what's next.
What do you think was the biggest challenge that you faced over the last couple of years in terms of your transition?
Having people constantly ask me why I wasn't playing basketball anymore, or when was I going back to play. You should
reminding
have kept playing.
Reminding you that you're not playing anymore. That's brilliant, isn't it? Thanks for the support.
You know what I'm saying? Man, yeah, I could go back, but did you ever go? When was the last time you left Ohio? You know what I'm saying? You have a passport. You couldn't do what I did if you wanted to. So, but at that time it was like I was very insecure. So that stuff really got to me, and I had to get to a point where I was like, you know what, all the basketball players who are questioning my decisions, or how I gained weight after I finished playing because I was enjoying retirement. I didn't have to work out and I could eat whatever I wanted. And some of them, you know what I'm saying? And they're going through the same thing now, though. That's the thing, and it's like it's really crazy that you can fix your mouth to talk about somebody, and you're going through that now. But the main thing is, you didn't go to UConn. I went to UConn. You weren't ranked number one nationally ever in your life for anything. And to my knowledge, you weren't suicidal while you were doing all these things.
Yeah.
And yeah, it might sound conceited or like I'm being cocky, but no, I'm stating facts. I'm pulling my stat sheets out nowadays. You're not going to downplay the work that I did and what I was able to create for myself with the help of so many people, because it definitely takes a village. But if I didn't believe in my mind that I could get to where I got to, I wouldn't have got there.
Yeah.
And but there's always that challenge of having people question you or challenge you for making decisions for yourself that don't impact them at all.
Yeah. The identity crisis that you go through when you first retire, it's I think that's one of the biggest challenges that athletes face.
Yeah.
And I think from my own personal experience and from the experience that I have now of working with athletes over the last decade or so around this subject, the biggest coping mechanism, I think, is not to look forwards all the time and away from your sport, but look back to what you created for yourself as a sports person. Look at all of those skills that you developed to become the best. As you say, you were ranked number one in the country. How did you actually get to be number one in the country? There's lots of things, little tiny things that have built you up to be that amazing athlete. And all of those things are really, really important in your life after sport. And that's the thing that you've got to do. You've got to look back on your achievements with pride to start with, because what you've achieved is amazing.
Thank you.
And it's not, as you rightly pointed out, very, very few people have ever done what you've done. So you look back on pride, and then you go, okay, well, the pride thing's brilliant, but that's not going to get me a job. That's not going to pay the mortgage. That's not going to put food on the table. So as proud as I feel, what else can I do? Okay, so how did I get to be that person? And what are the things that I learnt along the way that are going to give me the best opportunity to be the best person I can be now? So rather than shying away from your sport and shying away from all the achievements that you made, embrace it. Embrace the past in the right way, not the wrong way. And lots of people look back on their sporting history, their sporting past, with sadness because they're not there anymore, and with grief. And they go through that grieving process of leaving something behind that they've done every day of their life for 15, 20 years, whatever it might be. But without realizing that all those things are super, super important for the biggest part of your life going forward, which is you've got 20, 30, 35, 40 maybe years of working life ahead of you. And what you've achieved springboards you massively into that future. And hopefully you're finding now with what you're doing at TriNet that looking back on who you are from a sporting perspective gives you the opportunity to be amazing at TriNet, and is giving you the confidence to be Samarie in a different environment.
Definitely. Yeah, every time I hop on, a meeting with somebody, they always look at my plaques, and I don't pay them any attention. My wife did this for me because I had them all in the closet, and, we said, let's just go ahead and put them up, decorate the office. And so one day, it was actually just last week, and somebody pointed it out again, and I was like, you know what, let me take the time and actually look at all of these and read them and try to remember, when they happen. And I don't really remember any of them. Even the ones from college, I had no idea I even had those, but that gave me a lot of, pride and confidence. Like, wow, like I really worked that hard, and I believed in myself that much that I got up to work that hard. And that's what I guess accelerated this recent identity crisis I was having. And I was like, if I can put my mind to something and become that great at it, I can do it again. So no, do I want to work at TriNet forever? No, but I don't know what might happen. I might become the CEO of TriNet one day because I put my focus to it and I get better at at talking to people. I get better with sales. I get better with managing. I don't know what's going to happen. This is kind of a setup for the bigger opportunity. So I had to look at it like that. It just as every stage of my early basketball career was a setup for the big stage at UConn and at Kentucky and then overseas. It's literally the same thing. This is just my new life. It doesn't look the same. But yeah, I 1,000% empathize with those going through the same thing because you don't know who you are. You almost feel out of your body. You don't know where you're going. You don't know these new people. You're so used to working with certain types of people. And I think the hugest thing for me coming out was people really don't work all that hard, and not nearly as hard as we do as athletes. So I was like, oh my gosh, like who are you? Like, what am I doing? I always felt so lazy and just why am I doing this? I don't care how much money I'm making. I don't want to be around these types of people or doing this type of job. But after a while, it was like, that has nothing to do with me, because as long as I'm still getting my paycheck and Samarie's bills are paid and Samarie's eating, that's what matters at the end of the day. And you can be just as successful at something and make it just as sexy as your collegiate or professional sporting career. if you believe in that. And that's the other regret that I have, is not being confident in my journey and in what I accomplished, and allowing people to make me feel, allowing other people's opinions cause me grief of my past, because it wasn't me. I thought that I did great. But, after even my mom questioning my decision of leaving UConn, she just stopped talking about her wishing I stayed, and, if you stayed at UConn and yada, yada, yada. I didn't stay there because I went from weighing 185 pounds, I don't know how much that is in kilos, to 156 pounds in the span of 2 months. That's not normal. I wasn't going to class. I was sleeping in my room all day in the dark. Even when my roommate came in, I told her, do not turn the lights on. I don't want to see you. I don't want to be seen. I was mixing a cold and flu medicine that makes you, it also puts you to sleep. I was mixing that and Sprite to make myself go. I couldn't sleep, Steve. So no, I shouldn't have stayed at UConn. You should be glad I didn't stay at UConn. Yeah, it looks good and it sounds good, but everything ain't good, and not for everybody. So stuff like that, it was always questioning, did I make the right decisions because of what other people thought? But at the end of the day, I should be confident because I always have made the right decisions for myself and for my life, and that's all that matters at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. It takes a really strong person at a young age to turn away from all that noise and all the voices, the naysayers. It takes a really strong personality to do that. And it's probably not until and I really commend you for that, because I probably wouldn't have been able to do that at that age.
Thank you.
And I think for me, from my personal experience, it's only probably in the last 10 to 15 years that I've been able to shut out all the noise and be super focused on who I want to be and where I'm going, because I always look to other people who I respected and who I felt had a really valid opinion in my life, and let that be the voice that I heard over mine all the time. And sometimes they were right. Sometimes my gut feeling was telling me they were wrong, but I didn't go with it. I should have gone with my gut feeling on things. So I've learned over the last 10 years particularly to trust myself a lot more than I ever did, which is, and the younger you can do that, the more successful you be quicker. I think so. I definitely applaud you for being able to do that at such a young age. Listen, we're coming towards the end of the podcast. One quick question before we say goodbye. What advice, now that you're coming close to your 30th birthday, what advice? Well, listen, I'm nearly 50, so I can say that you're nearly 30.
Oh man, yeah, you're right. I should look forward to it. You're right. I'm almost
absolutely
30. Okay,
look forward to it. What advice would you give young Samarie, growing up in your sort of mid to late teens, coming through high school and getting your scholarship? What advice would you give her now that you have all the experience that you've got in life?
If you don't make choices for yourself and do what you want to do, you will regret it later in life. If you don't create and walk your own path, you will regret it. So always just be yourself. Like you said, block out that noise. And even if you feel like you don't have a reason to, just smile. Just smile and be happy.
Samarie
Nothing
Walker,
too deep, Steve.
Samarie Walker, you are a strong black woman. You are
Thank you.
a gay woman, but above all else, you're an amazing woman. And it's been an absolute pleasure the last hour and a half that we spent together. I'm delighted that you've been so open, so honest, and that we've discussed some really personal subjects to you. And without those conversations happening, we can't help other people. So I applaud you massively for that. Thank you very much for your time. Love yourself first, because if you can't love you, how can you expect to love anyone else? I've been Steve Moore, and you've been listening to the Human Athlete Podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you for joining us today on the Human Athlete Podcast. To learn more, we invite you to visit www.athletecareertransition.com. See you next time.